Welcome to Top Stories Hub. Today we've got a new story, a mystery you'll want to unravel. At a secluded table in the bustling restaurant, I perch, my gaze locked on the crumpled, budget $15 coupon gripped tightly in my hand. My fingers quiver, not from sorrow, but from a fiery rage that surges through me like a blazing inferno. I can still picture the instant earlier tonight when Emily, my spouse, slipped it into my hand. It was meant to be a birthday present, a gesture of care from the woman I've cherished, backed, and given up so much for. But now, I'm fuming, struck by the harsh truth hidden in this trivial slip of paper. The lively chatter and giggles of the posh diners around me blur into a vague buzz, yet all I can make out are the taunting whispers echoing in my mind. I think back to Emily presiding at the table's head, savoring costly wine with her high society pals, their chuckles slicing through me like a sharp blade. Her casual, belittling tone still rings in my ears when she remarked, "Come on, Michael, don't make a scene," as she lifted her glass. Then came her stinging follow-up, "It's sensible. You've always had a tough time, haven't you?" as though my setbacks were a shared jest among them. Each syllable reverberated in my head like a persistent mockery. Had a tough time. I poured my heart into crafting a life, chasing her aspirations, only to be branded a loser, nothing but a weight on her shoulders. Even her dad, William Carter, with his icy, detached stare and scornful voice, made it painfully clear I'd never measure up for his daughter. His grumbled comment, "You ought to be thankful Emily set up this entire dinner," still sears my memory. I can almost sense the smug grin on his face, that look of disdain that made me feel smaller than ever. Surrounded by the cackles of those who viewed me as pathetic, I quietly swore to myself, I'd no longer be the butt of their vicious gags. My hand trembles as I fish out my phone, and a notification flashes, flipping my world upside down. The text declares, "Done deal, Carter Industries is now yours." A wave of justification crashes over me. The business Emily idolized, the dynasty her father constructed and paraded with arrogance, belongs to me now. The irony is almost palpable. Come morning, she'll awaken to a nightmare she crafted herself. In my mind, I replay the years of being belittled, ridiculed, and dismissed as a mere flop. Every sacrifice, every late night, every ounce of effort I poured in went unseen by her and her clique of snobs. But now, the game has flipped. I ease back in my seat, my eyes wandering over the restaurant's refined ambience, the pricey wine, the meticulously selected lighting, the flawlessly arranged table. It all felt like a theater for a drama where I was scripted as the antagonist. Not anymore. Clutching that coupon, a symbol of all that's broken in our lives, I grasp that I wield the power to reshape my narrative. Every inhale brims with resolve, each heartbeat thumping a vow of reckoning. I'm done being the guy who quietly took the shame. I'm the one who commands the empire now, steering my own fate. I shut my eyes briefly, the phone's cool surface pressed against my skin, clinging to that game-changing message. My thoughts race with what's possible, a chilly grin spreading across my lips. Every jab, every harsh word, every scoffing chuckle, I recall them all. Tonight, amid their merrymaking, I'm certain my existence is on the cusp of transformation. Tomorrow, when Emily faces a truth far crueler than any birthday token, she'll grasp the real price of her actions. And I'll be there, with every part of me, watching her world fall apart. For as long as I can recall, my life has been a string of silent losses, an endless march of slights that seemed invisible to everyone but me. I think of the times I was the laughingstock for those who sneered at me. Despite topping my business school class, Carter Industries never gave me a shot. William Carter, Emily's father, always maintained I wasn't suited for the corporate game, his words scorching my mind like venom. Each snub, each curt glance, each biting remark chipped away at my self-respect. I can still see my first step into a Carter Industries meeting, brimming with optimism and drive, only to face muffled snickers and frosty glares. That's when it hit me, no matter how hard I worked, I'd always be an outcast, a washout unworthy of the dynasty Emily's family had forged. There was a phase when Emily, my wife, was my anchor. Early in our romance, her faith in me was so fierce it made me feel unstoppable. We shared visions, and I toiled endlessly to secure a future for us. But over time, things changed. Emily got swept up in the dazzling orbit of her rich friends, and bit by bit, she began to view me not as the partner of her dreams, but as someone who didn't meet her lofty expectations. I noticed the shift in her gaze whenever she sighed at my modest business attempts or tossed out a cutting comment, measuring my small wins against the flashy triumphs of her elite friends' husbands. Those instances cut deep, not just from the words, but because they mirrored the quiet rejection I'd faced for years. Night after night, as I lingered in my humble office or slaved over projects that barely caused a stir, the burden of each failure crushed me. My soul ached with a blend of yearning and bitterness, realizing the ambitions I cherished were drifting further away each day. In the shadows, I crafted my own domain, pouring every free second into snapping up minor assets and plotting a future only I believed in. I came to value the subtle strength of persistence, even as those around me mocked my goals. Despite the relentless stream of insults and the seemingly unending chain of letdowns, I wouldn't let their views shape who I was. Amid this emotional tempest, I held fast to one certainty: I was greater than their rejections. Every cruel word, every patronizing smirk, stoked my drive to show them they were wrong. I started to view each jab as a building block, a tough but needed trial that would guide me to a triumph they couldn't fathom. While Emily's giggles and William's icy comments lingered in my thoughts, I burned the midnight oil, diving into financial statements and legal papers, devising a plan to upend everything. It was a grueling, drawn-out effort, rooted in years of sacrifice, covert scheming, and the silent gathering of influence in places they never thought to check. I recall the evenings I'd drag myself back to our simple apartment, my shoulders sagging under the weight of unfulfilled hopes, staring into the mirror, second-guessing every choice I'd made. I wondered if I was ever truly built for greatness or if I was fated to remain the underdog, forever in the shade of those who despised me. But every tear I shed in solitude, every restless night spent plotting, made me more resolute. I saw that while they took my struggles as evidence of my flaws, they missed the toughness forged in the crucible of hardship. Each moment of shame wasn't a sign of defeat but a lesson in endurance. Now, teetering on the edge of a pivotal moment, I can nearly savor the bitter sweetness of payback. I've constructed something extraordinary in the hidden corners of my life, a strategy that will soon deliver the very empire that humiliated me into my grasp. The years of disgrace haven't shattered me, they've honed my determination. I'm no longer the man who buckled under others' expectations. I've become the master of my fate, turning every slight and sneer into fuel for the grand plan that's gradually coming to light. I recall the crisp dawn glow as I pulled up to Carter Industries, a place that had long stood as a monument to the might and pride of the family that scorned me. The towering structure, its glass exterior mirroring the faint sky, loomed as I navigated the secure lot. A shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from anticipation and grit. Today was the day I'd prove I wasn't the feeble, doubtful man they imagined. In the executive parking area, my ally, Ethan Brooks, stood ready. His gaze held a blend of firmness and quiet triumph as he passed me the final takeover documents. "They're in a frenzy," he whispered, his words echoing the certainty that had been building in me for years. I knew Emily was inside, oblivious to the tempest about to upend her world. Every stride I took today would reshape Carter Industries' destiny forever. As I crossed the threshold of the glass doors, a palpable tension crackled in the air. Staff members shot me puzzled, curious looks, recognizing me only as Emily's less-than-stellar husband, a guy the corporate bigwigs in these corridors never took seriously. Little did they know, I'd devoted endless quiet hours to amassing my resolve, forging key connections, and meticulously orchestrating this ultimate play. The elevator's ascent to the executive level offered a fleeting moment of reflection, my mind flooded with memories of late nights hunched over legal contracts and financial data. Every hushed jab, every slight that once chipped away at my confidence, now stoked the fire in me to take charge and earn the respect I'd always been owed. The boardroom hummed with energy as I stepped inside. William Carter, seated at the table's helm, let his self-assured mask slip for a heartbeat when he spotted me. Emily, as polished and graceful as ever, held her poise, though a spark of doubt flickered in her gaze. The senior execs, once unwavering in their loyalty to her father's iron-fisted directives, now stared with widening eyes, a growing sense of discomfort settling in. I strode deliberately to the head of the table, each step purposeful and calculated. Tucked in my briefcase were the final takeover documents, a testament to years of stealthy strategy and tireless dedication. I drew a steady breath, the moment thick with expectation and the thrill of transformation just within reach. I eased into the chair at the table's head, my gaze sweeping across the stunned faces before me. "Everyone," I started, my tone calm yet resolute, "today signals a new chapter for this organization." I let the words hang, catching the first glint of alarm in their eyes. I've toiled in the background for too long, piecing together every minor win and growing from every setback. Now, I stand here as the new owner of Carter Industries. A heavy, uneasy hush blanketed the room. Emily's eyes widened in shock and dread, while William's once cocky demeanor faltered, his shaky hands reaching for the documents. Each pulse in the silence was a stark reminder of the years I'd been undervalued, the countless times I'd been made to feel trivial and invisible. I pressed on, my voice deliberate and clear. Every doubt cast my way, every cutting remark, every snub I weathered taught me something vital, laying the groundwork for this moment. I've spent years scheming, scrimping, and mastering the business game while most of you saw me as a nobody. Today, I'm not just taking a company, I'm reclaiming my pride and my path forward. The room's tension thickened, familiar faces now carved with disbelief and unease. Emily's lips tightened into a thin line, her eyes flitting between me and the legal papers that stood as proof of my victory. William's silence screamed louder than words, betraying a loss of dominance he'd never seen coming. Every syllable I uttered underscored the grueling road I'd traveled, one paved with struggle, dismissal, and a smoldering determination. I thought back to those solitary late nights, the constant rejections from those who should have had my back, and the quiet vow I made to never let their judgments define me. Under the boardroom's harsh lights, those years of hardship had crystallized into one bold move. I locked eyes with Emily, the woman who'd once shared my dreams and my life, and declared, "This isn't just about owning a business. It's a statement that I'm done being overlooked." The acquisition papers rested on the table, an irrefutable record of my triumph. I could feel the power dynamic shifting. Gone was the smug confidence of those who'd always belittled me, replaced by the dawning truth that the underdog had climbed to the top. In that instant, the room's faint buzz gave way to the thundering of my own heartbeat, a rhythm promising a future I now held the reins to. I'd turned years of pain and shame into a single, unyielding act of payback, one that left no question. The final play was mine, and it was set in stone. Sitting there, the burden of every past slight now offset by the raw authority radiating from me, I felt a serene confidence. I'd claimed control, not with brute strength, but through the steady grit of persistence and an unyielding quest for fairness. Today wasn't just about seizing a company, it was about taking back who I am. In that boardroom, where fear and doubt supplanted arrogance and privilege, I'd left my mark. I knew the fight wasn't over, but right then, with every gaze fixed on me, I realized the final move was done. The authority, the respect, the future I'd been denied were now mine to wield. I stepped into the boardroom with a measured, purposeful stride that mirrored my inner resolve. The vibe shifted in an instant. Emily's lips twitched into a smirk when she saw me, her voice oozing fake warmth. "Michael, honey, I'm swamped here." "What's this about?" she asked, her tone breezy but tinged with skepticism. Brushing off her coyness, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a tidy stack of legal papers. Crisp and conclusive, they were the product of countless sleepless nights and every nagging doubt I'd faced. With calm precision, I slid them across the table to her, watching her perfectly manicured fingers pause before grasping them. For an agonizing moment, I studied her reaction. The color leached from her face, replaced by a stark shock evident even in the faint twitch of her eyes. William, rigid beside her, grabbed the papers as if they were hazardous, his hands quivering as he scanned the opening line. I could practically taste the panic swelling in the room. The words, "Carter Industries acquisition complete," shone like a lighthouse of my success. I leaned back, crossing my arms, a silent signal that nothing could undo what I'd set in motion. A dense silence enveloped the room as everyone grappled with the drama unfolding. Emily's gaze bounced between me and the documents, her face a swirl of anger and disbelief. This can't be real," she faltered, her voice cracking, barely masking the fear she tried to cloak with scorn. I flashed a faint smirk, relishing the rare sight of her usual haughtiness stripped away. "Oh, it's very real, my dear wife," I replied, my voice cool and unyielding, leaving no space for debate. The room's dynamics were visibly shifting. The upscale decor, the gleaming table, the plush chairs, all had silently witnessed years of my dismissal and degradation. Now, they framed the ultimate turnaround. Every barb thrown my way over the years seemed to funnel into this one, defining moment. I remembered the nights spent dissecting contracts and financials, each page a quiet revolt against the contempt I'd endured. Everyone had brought me here, to the point where I could finally grasp the power I'd been denied. William's expression was a mix of incredulity and fury. His carefully curated calm was unraveling as he read on, his eyes narrowing as he grasped that his iron grip was slipping. Emily, once so sure of her own supremacy, now looked fragile, her polished exterior cracking as she wrestled with the new reality. The room, once alive with the murmur of confident whispers and smug glances, now thrummed with a current of dread and uncertainty. Everyone there could feel the seismic shift in control, even if they didn't dare voice it. I spoke again, my voice unwavering, brimming with subdued victory. "Today, this company ceases to be a fortress of old vendettas and hollow pride. Today, I take back not just my honor, but the future stolen from me." My words echoed in the quiet, each one deliberate, heavy with the scars of past wrongs. Emily's eyes widened further, a mute plea for mercy she knew wouldn't come. I'd forged every moment of humiliation into the strength now pulsing through me. The document sat on the table, a monument to my painstaking planning and the final strike against a system that had scorned me. In that moment, I felt the room itself recognize the shift. The power balance had tipped for good. I was no longer the man written off and disregarded by those who deemed me a failure. A slow smile curved my lips as I realized every sneer, every cutting quip, every offhand glance had only hardened my resolve. With a final, piercing stare that sliced through the dense tension, I let the reality sink in. The empire Emily once cherished was mine now, and there was nothing more to say. The silence was absolute, and in that still moment, I knew I'd not only won a legal fight but had also reclaimed every fragment of my identity that had been torn away. This was my grand unveiling, a raw, unvarnished truth that left no room for denial. My eyes locked with hers one last time, and I silently vowed that my quest to take back what was rightfully mine was just beginning. I watched Emily's face twist as panic seized her features. Her voice, usually so sleek and self-assured, now quavered sharply. "Dad, make this stop," she pleaded, her cry aimed at William, whose face had turned pale as ash. Her desperation showed in every trembling lip and wild glance as she looked to him, hoping he could unravel the events spinning out. But William, ever cold and unyielding, stayed mute. His silence roared louder than any words could. In that electric moment, I knew he saw this was no fluke. The air crackled with his realization that I'd outmaneuvered every scheme he'd laid down for years, and nothing could turn back the tide now. The room's tension spiked as Emily's phone buzzed, slicing through the heavy quiet. Her hand, already shaking with fear, fumbled for the device. The screen's glow cast an eerie light across her face as she read the message, her features tightening with dread. The text on her screen confirmed her deepest terror: her role as VP was gone, a crushing blow that left her visibly rattled. For a fleeting second, I felt a mix of triumph and sorrow, triumph at the culmination of my carefully plotted revenge, and sorrow for the pain that would now shatter her fragile bubble of perfection. Her eyes, wide with betrayal and shock, met mine across the table. "What have you done?" she gasped, her voice breaking with disbelief. I rose slowly, smoothing my suit's crisp lines to cement my newfound command. Every move was intentional, every gesture crafted to highlight the power shift that had taken place. The room, packed with hushed onlookers, seemed to pause as I answered in a calm tone that masked the storm inside. "I did what you never believed I could," I said plainly, letting the gravity of those words settle. Her eyes brimmed with desperation as she saw that everything she'd built, every polished facade of wealth and superiority, was collapsing around her. The shock wasn't just about losing her job, it was the gut-punch realization that every humiliating jab, every snarky comment, every dismissive look from her family and friends had led to this defining moment. I thought back to the lonely nights spent poring over business reports and legal texts, relentlessly chasing a future she'd always thought was out of my reach. Those quiet hours of plotting had been my sanctuary and my defiance. Now, they'd fused into one unchangeable act of reckoning. I paced slowly around the table, my gaze never leaving hers, letting the weight of the situation sink in for both of us. The dim lighting didn't hide the raw expressions on everyone's faces, revealing the stark truth of our reality. Emily's panic surged with each passing second. Her trembling hand reached out, as if she could clutch the last threads of her once solid position, but there was nothing left to grab. The phone message had locked in her fate, and there was no undoing it. William's face stayed impassive, a cold mask that only deepened her sense of abandonment. In that prolonged, weighty silence, I could almost hear the echoes of every doubting whisper and mocking laugh that had haunted me for years. I'd been the guy they all saw as weak, a nobody unfit for the world Emily adored. Yet here I stood, having turned every slight into a stepping stone to the power I now held. Their every moment of scorn had only fueled my drive to prove them wrong. The finality of that shift was captured in the message Emily had just read, a digital verdict that stripped away her authority and her pride. As the quiet deepened around me, a peculiar calm settled in, a tranquil confidence born from the long-overdue justice I'd fought for. With every heartbeat, I sensed the balance of destiny tilting firmly in my direction. Emily's gaze probed mine, searching for a trace of the affection we once shared, but all she met was the resolute stare of a man who'd fully claimed his inner power. "I pulled it off," I said in a low, unwavering voice. "I did what was necessary. I reclaimed what belonged to me, step by step, and now things are finally right." Her expression twisted into a blend of terror and rage as she grasped that her frantic pleas and wild gestures were futile against the sweeping wave of change. In that electric moment, the weight of our altered reality bore down on us both. I'd long embraced the role of the overlooked underdog, the guy everyone dismissed, but now I'd emerged from the darkness into the stark glow of my own drive. As tears of defeat welled in Emily's eyes, I knew her desperation completed the mosaic of my transformation, a journey sparked by a cheap, demeaning coupon that had evolved into an unstoppable force, reshaping everything she valued. A fleeting rush of victory coursed through me as I relished my triumph, but a shiver of disbelief cut it short. Just as I started to ease into my new role as owner, William cleared his throat. His voice, steady yet dripping with a subtle poison, sliced through the boardroom's dense silence. "This isn't finished," he said deliberately, his tone measured, like he was delivering a line from a well-practiced script. I glanced up from the documents scattered before me, my mind racing for a moment with the thought that this could be another of his vicious ploys. But his eyes had changed, icy, scheming, and hell-bent on snatching back control. William reached into his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a hefty legal document. With a calculated gesture, he set it on the table in front of me. The bold header jumped out immediately, a contract claiming I'd handed over my shares to a holding company he controlled. My pulse quickened as I skimmed the opening lines, each word mocking me with the threat that my victory could unravel. In that instant, my carefully woven plans, countless late nights spent dissecting numbers and legal jargon, seemed to waver under the pressure of his challenge. The bitter irony hit me hard. Just when I thought I'd turned every slight into strength, William was setting his own snare. My thoughts churned as I studied him. I'd always known he was a master manipulator, notorious for his underhanded tactics. But I never expected him to sink this low. That document wasn't just paper, it was a battle cry, a last-ditch effort to squash my rising authority. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room darting between us, each person hunting for hints about who'd come out on top in this clash of resolve. The air grew thick with mounting tension, the faint rustle of papers and hushed whispers of executives trying to piece together the unfolding drama. Even Emily's eyes, still glistening with fear and disbelief, flicked anxiously toward her father. William's voice, low and intentional, filled the space as he began reading from his contract aloud. With every sentence, I felt the solid ground of my power quake. He asserted I'd willingly given up my shares, a blatant lie crafted to dismantle everything I'd built. For a split second, shock froze me. Heat crept up my face as I realized my adversaries hadn't yet surrendered their grip on Carter Industries' legacy. Every jab, every insult I'd endured seemed to converge in that moment of confrontation. But I refused to let my dismay show. Instead, I held a steady, composed gaze as I listened to William's delivery. His tone carried a clear challenge. He expected me to buckle, to confess I'd been outsmarted by a man who'd thrived on the winning side his whole life. In that hushed moment, my mind raced, revisiting every obstacle, every cutting remark that had driven me here. I thought of the sleepless nights, the endless hours of planning and analysis that had led to this point, and I knew I hadn't come this far to crumble before one final act of deceit. With deliberate calm, I reached into my briefcase, feeling the heft of my own documents, the ones that held the true story of my ownership. I slid out a folder packed with proof of every legal move I'd made, every contract that solidified my rightful claim. I met William's stare with a piercing look that said everything. This wasn't a time for doubt or second-guessing. I'd battled too long against the odds to be derailed by a single, cleverly forged document. The boardroom sank into a dense silence as I took a steady breath and began to speak. "William," I said in a low, controlled voice, "you might have your contract, but you're wrong if you think it alters the facts." I laid out, in plain and simple terms, how every share and asset was accounted for, how my moves were documented in agreements far stronger than the one he'd presented. I made it clear that my shares had never been transferred, that his contract was nothing but a sham, a frantic attempt to steal back power from the man they'd always underestimated. A flicker of doubt crossed William's face as I presented the evidence, my words firm and unwavering. I recalled those long nights when I felt like a mere pawn in their schemes, plagued by constant self-doubt. Now, in the boardroom's harsh light, I channeled every moment of shame into the conviction powering my voice. I watched William's smug facade start to crack, his eyes widening as he realized his carefully set trap was falling apart. The executives traded uneasy glances, and even Emily's gaze carried a mix of disbelief and grief as her father's plan unraveled. I pressed on, detailing how every legal step I'd taken was thoroughly recorded and validated, leaving no space for William's claims to take hold. I explained that while he tried to make the final play, my strategy had foreseen every angle, and his contract was nothing but a hollow illusion meant to obscure the truth. My words flowed steadily, each one bolstering my determination and weakening his deception's grip. The anger and pain from years of being undervalued morphed into a sharp, focused resolve. When I finished, the room was quiet save for the sound of my own even breathing. I saw the dawning awareness in William's eyes, a blend of regret and rage that revealed his inner conflict. He'd tried to fight back, but in doing so, he'd only underscored the strength of my conviction. In that moment, I knew I'd not only secured my rightful place at the head of Carter Industries but had also sent a loud message to everyone there: no matter how many times they tried to knock me down, I'd rise tougher each time. The lines of battle were clear, and though William's attack had been bold, it paled against the force of my resolve. Today, I reaffirmed my hold, not just on the company, but on every shred of dignity their cruelty had chipped away. Every detail of the day had built to this pivotal moment, the final play in a years-long game of power and betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on William as he reached for the folder I'd slid across the table earlier. The room held its breath, the air heavy with the tension of an approaching reckoning. I could sense every heartbeat, every trace of uncertainty in the executives' eyes as they awaited the next step. The silence was tangible, as if the boardroom walls themselves were part of this clash of wills. With a slow, deliberate motion, I opened the folder, revealing a meticulously arranged set of documents I'd prepared well in advance. Each page was a strategic snare, crafted to expose every gap and false move William had ever tried. His eyes widened as he scanned the first document, a dissolution agreement I'd signed 3 days prior. That single sheet was the cornerstone of my plan. Through it, I dismantled Carter Industries' parent company and shifted every asset into a new, untouchable corporation. It was a move that not only stripped William of his leverage but also rendered his fraudulent contracts worthless. Disbelief etched his face as the executives began to murmur. Emily leaned forward, her earlier bravado fading into a mix of fear and confusion as she struggled to grasp how her carefully built world was collapsing. "What's this?" she demanded, her voice quaking with anger and desperation. I held her gaze firmly, unshaken by the chaos around me. "This," I said quietly, "is the dissolution agreement I signed 3 days ago, a document that completely voids any claim you might have to this company." I went on, outlining the evidence, every legal tactic, every financial shift, every clandestine meeting, and every late night of plotting. I described how the new corporation was not only shielded from the old empire's schemes but was also grounded in transparency and ironclad legality. The room seemed to close in as the truth took hold. William's face grew pale, his once assured posture now one of fragility. He'd always assumed I was too naive, too weak to challenge the status quo, but now it was evident that every slight, every moment of humiliation, had been forged into a weapon in my arsenal. I remembered the days when I was brushed off as just Emily's failed husband, a man lacking the vision or grit to claim what was his. Now, I was the mastermind of a new era, and every word I spoke in that boardroom moved me closer to ultimate vindication. I could see the executives, once complicit in William's plots, starting to grasp the weight of my actions. Their eyes flicked nervously between William and me, as if they were watching the collapse of a long-standing belief system. I spoke of fidelity, integrity, and the steep cost of underestimating someone with nothing left to lose. I explained how each move I made was carefully planned, driven not just by bitterness, but by a profound need to restore my sense of self, long tarnished and pushed aside. My voice gained strength with every word, carrying the authority of a man who'd finally seized the reins of his fate. "You believed you could keep me hidden away," I said, my tone steady but firm, "but today, I prove that every stumble, every cutting remark, every moment of shame was a lesson that led me to this decisive victory." A low, uneasy murmur rippled through the room as William's eyes burned with a mix of rage and hopelessness. He fumbled for his own papers, his trembling hands grasping at the remnants of his fading control, but it was far too late. I'd already clinched the win with the dissolution agreement, a crushing, final strike that left no room for debate. In that electric moment, as the truth gleamed on the polished surface of each document, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. The checkmate was done. I'd outsmarted every snare laid in my path, transforming every slight into a stepping stone toward my triumph. I knew the power dynamic had shifted for good, and from now on, Carter Industries would no longer be tied to the old elite's hubris. Instead, it would stand as proof of the quiet tenacity of a man who refused to let others' cruelty define him. I closed the folder with care, my gaze locked on William's defeated stare, letting the weight of the moment settle. The game was finished, and the board was mine to command. I turned slowly to face the board of directors, sensing every pair of eyes in the room fixed on me, a blend of awe and apprehension in their stares. I took a deep breath to steady myself and spoke in a clear, unyielding voice that brooked no opposition. "My first order as leader," I declared, letting the words linger in the charged silence. I could see the shock wash over Emily's face, her carefully maintained composure fracturing as she sensed what was coming. "You're out," I stated, my voice solid and unwavering. The room erupted in a chorus of gasps and whispers. Emily's eyes widened, her hand darting to her mouth in a silent cry for mercy. "You can't do this," she screamed, panic seeping into her voice as the reality of her fall hit hard. A strange mix of satisfaction and sadness stirred in me as I watched her confidence shatter. For years, I'd borne the sneers, the unspoken judgments, and the pain of being treated like an afterthought in my own life. This moment was the peak of countless years of silent suffering and relentless drive, the point where I finally took back what was mine. 2 security guards stepped into the room, their presence cementing the decision's finality. Emily's eyes begged for a glimmer of compassion, for the tenderness of the man she once loved, but all she met was the steely determination of someone who'd endured enough. I stood, smoothing my suit's creases, keeping my eyes on her to ensure every word I spoke rang with truth. This company, the empire you leaned on to mask your flaws, is mine now. It's done with lies and hollow promises. Each word reverberated in the hushed room, a testament to how every moment of humiliation had only made me stronger. As the guards moved closer to escort Emily out, I could almost feel the air shift. The executives who'd once bought into her false sense of invincibility now regarded me with wary respect, their gazes reflecting both fear and admiration, signaling the dawn of a new era, one I'd steer with honesty and resolve. I knew this wasn't just a corporate move, it was a bold statement that the old regime, built on deceit and privilege, was gone for good. I continued addressing the room, my voice softer now but still firm. Today isn't just about letting one person go. It's about making things right. For too long, this company served those who put me and others down. I've taken every jab, every slight, and turned them into wisdom. Now, I'm here to guide us toward a future where hard work and merit matter most. I noticed subtle nods, a quiet shift in perspective taking hold among those who'd watched my rise in silence. It was as if the room itself acknowledged the years of unfairness and was finally ready to welcome a fresh start. Emily, still grappling with her collapse, tried to speak again, but her voice broke as the guards gently but firmly led her away. Her eyes locked with mine one last time, a mix of defiance and desperation in her gaze. In that moment, a twinge of regret for the love we'd once shared flickered, but I stood firm in my choice. This wasn't just my win, it was a reckoning for all that was built on false pride and cruelty. I settled back into my chair at the table's head, the burden of past humiliations lifting with the certainty that the future was mine to shape. The boardroom, once ringing with the laughter of those who saw me as weak, now stood silent, awed by the authority I'd reclaimed. Every choice, every step I'd taken to build my strength, had brought me to this pivotal moment. I was no longer the man who suffered in silence. I was the leader of a reborn company, one that would no longer abide the arrogance and greed of its past. As the day unfolded, I began to share my vision for what lay ahead. I talked about new policies, innovative ideas, and a culture rooted in respect, transparency, and effort. I listened closely to the executives' murmurs of agreement, their expressions slowly shifting from fear to hope. In that moment, I realized the fall of the old guard wasn't just my personal victory, it was the start of a transformation that would redefine our core values. My heart raced with relief and determination. Challenges loomed, but I knew I had the strength to face them. The collapse of those who'd once belittled me was the first stride toward a brighter tomorrow, where everyone would be valued for their contributions, not their connections or status. In the quiet moments that followed, as I leaned back and took in the weight of what had happened, a profound clarity settled over me. The pain of the past had given way to a fierce determination, and with every second, the new order I was forging felt more real. This was my time to lead, to prove that true power stemmed not from wealth or entitlement, but from perseverance, integrity, and the courage to stand tall when no one else would. As the day wound down, I knew the old regime's downfall was final, a collapse that would forever mark the end of one era and the birth of a legacy grounded in justice and strength. The room's tension peaked as I heard the security guards closing in. My heart pounded as I watched Emily, her face a storm of fury and desperation, turn to her father. "Dad, do something," she cried, her voice breaking with a panic I'd never heard before. But William, always the one to wield control with icy detachment, averted his gaze, as if he'd anticipated my move. In that moment, the room seemed to contract, every eye glued to the unfolding scene. I caught the uncertainty in the top executive's stares and even a flicker of fear in those who'd once revered her. Before anyone could respond, William's phone buzzed on the table, its screen flaring with a new message. The device, usually a quiet extension of his command, now carried the weight of destiny. His face shifted from grim determination to confusion and dread. The speakerphone crackled, and a deep, steady voice announced, "Mr. Carter, the SEC has just launched an investigation into your finances." A faint, almost smug smile tugged at my lips as I listened. The lawyer's words cut through the silence like a blade. William's jaw tightened, his face paling in a way that stirred both vindication and a strange pang of sorrow in me. I couldn't hold back a soft chuckle, struck by the irony that the man who'd fought so hard to stay in control was now unraveling due to his own greed. I'd sent a full audit of Carter Industries to the authorities long before today, a carefully calculated step planned meticulously, even as everyone doubted my ability. This audit's reveal was the final twist in our long, bitter struggle for power and betrayal. In that moment, I saw that every slight, every mocking word, every calculated jab had built to this turning point. As William's expression morphed from shock to rage, the security guards moved in with precise determination. They stepped forward, gripping Emily's arms with firm resolve. She resisted briefly, her eyes blazing with anger as she shot me a glare. "You think this is your victory?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fear and defiance. I leaned in slightly, my words falling like heavy stones in the quiet. "Oh, Emily, it was over the second you gave me that $15 coupon," I said, my tone low and almost casual despite the chaos swirling around us. The words lingered, echoing off the boardroom's sleek walls. For years, I'd endured the shame of being seen as a failure, a mere shadow in their grand plans. Now, as security pulled her away and her protests faded, I felt a bittersweet satisfaction. The betrayal was complete. Not only had Emily aligned with those who scorned me, but her father, the one who should have backed her, was now powerless, undone by his own schemes. The room, once brimming with the elite's smug certainty, now pulsed with a raw, new energy. I saw William struggling to pull himself together, his eyes flicking between the phone and the scattered papers on the table. The air was thick with the realization that the rules had shifted. His attempt to regain control with a single fake contract and a last-second legal trick had spectacularly backfired. Every detail of our power struggle had led to this moment of total collapse. I thought back to the countless nights spent alone, every time I was ridiculed and brushed off, and I knew my actions weren't just about revenge. They were the culmination of years of quiet resolve and a desperate need to reclaim my dignity. Even as the authorities were alerted and William's world began to cave under the weight of an impending SEC probe, I stayed composed. I watched the board members exchange looks, their faces showing a mix of shock and grudging respect. It was as if they finally saw the man behind the steadfast persistence, the one who'd endured endless betrayal and shame only to rise when it mattered most. I felt the finality of the power shift, a sense of freedom coursing through me. In that charged atmosphere, I understood that betrayal wore many masks, Emily's frantic pleas, William's last stand of defiance, and even the calculated precision of the security team were all threads in a larger tale, a story where I was no longer the overlooked husband or the underestimated man. I'd become the one who rewrote every rule they'd held dear. The distant wail of sirens nearing the building underscored the inevitability of justice. As the reality of arrests and the fall of an empire sank in, I felt a quiet surge of triumph. I'd turned every betrayal into a chance, every moment of disdain into a stepping stone toward the life I'd always envisioned. The boardroom fell silent again as the guards led Emily away, and William stared at his phone, his face etched with defeat. Betrayal's taste was bitter, but it was a price I was ready to pay for the future I'd fought so hard to secure. In that pivotal moment, as the old regime fell apart around us and the dawn of a fresh start glowed on the horizon, I realized I hadn't just survived, I'd won. The message was unmistakable: those who betray and belittle will eventually face the full weight of their actions, and today, justice had finally shown up. That evening, I stood alone in the tranquil vastness of my penthouse, the day's turmoil melting into the soft shadows of night. I lingered by the towering window, a glass of velvety whiskey in hand, staring out at a city that now felt ripe for my taking. The twinkling lights below sparkled like far-off pledges of a new chapter, each one proof of the transformation that had reshaped my world. For years, I'd been pushed aside, underestimated, and mocked by those who flaunted their wealth and status. But tonight, as I watched the city pulse with potential, I knew the game had changed. The empire that once stood as a painful reminder of my lowest moments was now mine to shape and lead. The path to this point had been anything but easy. Every jab, every smirk, every brush-off had driven me to toil in silence, constructing a stronghold of grit and cunning. I could still recall the endless nights bent over paperwork, plotting each move of my comeback and rise, even as I was branded nothing more than Emily's failed husband. I refused to let their scorn define me. Every cutting word had ignited a spark inside, growing fiercer each day until it roared into a force even the mightiest couldn't overlook. Now, as I savored the whiskey's warmth spreading through me, I fully embraced the truth that I'd taken the reins at last. I wandered slowly into the spacious living area, where sleek furniture and modern art stood as quiet witnesses to a life once steeped in grief and rejection. My thoughts drifted back to the boardroom, to every high-stakes moment when I faced down those who'd shamed me. I could see Emily's frantic eyes, the fury in William's tone, and the weight of every choice that had brought me here. It felt like every sacrifice, every hidden struggle waged in the quiet of my soul, had been steering me toward this very night. I hadn't just seized a company, I'd reclaimed my pride and rebuilt my sense of worth from the ashes. The new empire I now governed wasn't forged only through legal tactics and clever documents. It was crafted on the long, grueling path of persistence. I'd learned that real power didn't come from inherited riches or privileged networks, but from the strength to rise after every fall. I could still feel the sting of every taunting remark, every dismissive glance. I remembered how small I felt in the presence of those who looked down on me. Yet I'd taken all that pain, all that resentment, and turned it into a strategy, one that left no space for hesitation or second-guessing. Now, the empire Emily had revered was a symbol of my resilience, a shining testament to my hard-earned victory. In the stillness of my penthouse, the city outside echoed my inner calm, brimming with untapped possibilities. I stepped over to the wide desk by the window and laid out the documents that had locked in my position. Each sheet chronicled my battles, every clause and signature a marker of how far I'd traveled. My fingers traced the crisp paper, sensing the gravity of my decisions and the hope of what lay ahead. The empire I'd claimed was more than a business, it was a fresh start, a future free from the shadows of past failures. Tonight, I wasn't a man shaped by others' cruelty, but a man reborn, liberated to carve out my own path. I poured another splash of whiskey into my glass, its golden glow mirroring the resolve in my eyes. The room, though hushed, seemed to hum with the echoes of every win and every loss that had led me here. I could still hear the whispers of doubt that once crowded my mind, the voices insisting I'd never escape the darkness. But now, standing alone with the city's gentle buzz as my companion, I felt a deep sense of freedom. I'd toppled the empire that once embodied my shame, and in doing so, I'd rewritten my life story. Every betrayal, every tear, every lonely moment had been a building block toward the future I now welcomed. I sank into my leather chair, the cool, smooth surface a sharp contrast to the fiery passion that now defined me. I let myself reflect for a moment, weighing the cost of my victory and the promise of renewal. The road ahead wasn't finished. There were still fights to wage and hurdles to clear. But in that moment, I was filled with unshakable optimism. I knew my strength came from the trials I'd faced and the bravery to confront them directly. Each challenge had made me wiser, tougher, and more committed to creating something enduring, far beyond the fleeting thrill of retribution. As I gazed out over the city, I could almost see the future taking shape, a future where my empire would stand as a monument to resilience, fairness, and the relentless spirit of humanity. I raised my glass in a quiet toast to the man I'd become, someone who'd seized control of his fate, who turned every slight into a foundation for greatness. The night was calm, yet vibrant with the promise of fresh starts. In the profound stillness of my penthouse, with the city as my witness, I pledged that this empire would be more than a record of my success, it would be a guiding light for everyone who'd ever been cast aside. I was no longer bound by my past, but defined by the strength and resolve that had carried me to this moment of absolute power and newfound liberty. That's all for today's tale on Top Stories Hub. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you'd like to see next.